Guys, really excited to be here tonight for the Collectible Investment Chat, joined by my co-host Narayan, and then friends of the club, Tom Derby and Ben Sheehan. How's everybody doing tonight?
Good. Well, I hope members of the club, right? Doing well.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, I'm well, thank you. I'm a little well than you were in that promo video where you looked a little sunburnt there, Justin.
Yeah, it was a rough week at the beach.
It looked pretty
Yeah.
terrible, mate.
Yeah, that's right. Narayan, how you doing tonight?
Doing pretty good. It's a great second night so far. Yeah,
Nice.
that's great.
Good deal. So,
Well, guys, go ahead, Tom.
oh no, I was waiting on you. My bad.
That's right. Well, guys, real quick for those of the members or people joining in all across the world here that might not know who you are, if you guys maybe just give a brief introduction of who you are and kind of what your place in the hobby is. Tom, if you want to start that off.
Okay. My name's Tom Derby. I guess I've been trading Star Wars and through toy shops since 1990, and started a company called Cloud City Collectibles in the mid 90s. Helped take the grading company AFA to the next level and started CIB, Collectible Investment Brokerage, in 2005. These days, I mostly do authentications, brokerage of pre-production, really rare items. Try to encourage honest Star Wars dealing throughout the world, and trade some of the finest Star Wars items. Things that are beyond my imagination when I first began. I never would have thought I would be trading in some of the items that we're trading in. So very blessed.
Yeah, you've just done an incredible amount for the hobby. Ben, maybe just a little bit of background on yourself.
Yeah, I've been a collector, I guess, since around, I guess, the end of 1991 in Australia, from Melbourne, Australia. And, over the years, I guess, my collecting evolved as it tends to do. And, I'll wind up here in the States, quite a bit later on, I guess, now kind of hunting down as best I can, kind of the harder to find prototype and pre-production items. And, I guess I just feel really, really kind of connected to the hobby in a lot of ways. And I've been lucky enough to work on a few book projects over recent times, and even extending way back to the Kelman book, I guess, early 2000s. But yeah, no, I'm a pretty passionate collector. I'm kind of really immersed in the hobby, the culture of the hobby, and I love the items as much as anyone. But yeah, it goes back a long way now. If I think about it, it's really kind of, it's getting up, I guess, 27 years, which is, or 27 years, even longer, 28 years. 28 and a bit, in fact, yeah. My math's not so good. But you guys look like you're yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I said I was
got
going
a
to say
delay
we're
here,
so
I think.
lucky to have both of you in our hometown. So we've gotten to know both of you very well, but probably a lot of people only know you guys just maybe from being experts in the hobby. I mean, Tom, you've got your signature on a lot of certificates, a lot of authentication, and Ben, you've also authenticated quite a few pieces. But tell us about your journey. How did you become the experts in the field in authentication and verifying some of the most exclusive items that we see in our collecting? Ben, why don't you start, and we'll go with Tom.
Yeah, okay. Well, I guess I feel really fortunate. Like when the hobby was evolving through the 1990s, you pretty much were dealing with, the knowledge base was not tremendously big. The books that were out there were not particularly current. You had a pretty, I guess, solid base of collectors who were interacting with each other online, but kind of existing in isolation in Australia, like I was, it was often a case of working things out for yourself. With something like the Australian Vinyl Cape Jar, I had one from my childhood collection that didn't gel with what the facts were out there about the Vinyl Cape Jar released in America. So pretty early on, I realized there was probably a lot of knowledge to mine and a lot of kind of exploration and research to do. And given my background as a journalist, and I was working on, I guess, journalism that required a little bit of research, and naturally I kind of gravitated towards that. Of course, you had Tom turning up in the States, like around about, well, I became aware of Tom, I think, around about 1997. I was working construction in Thailand at the time, and I think I began to call him and he was already pretty much established an expert. But in addition to Tom, you had guys like Chris Georgioulis and Ron Salvatore who really would kind of guide newer collectors once they turned up online through things. And I guess part of growing with that knowledge base as it grew and learning how it was formulated and the framework, if you will, for the hobby and seeing how that evolved, I pretty much was able to kind of hook into that and develop areas that I felt I was learning more about, or look towards spaces that were empty and try to fill gaps that way. And guys like Tom obviously were pretty important for me being so far away. But the last maybe 5-10 years or so that I've been traveling the world and had access more and more to people inside Canada, a lot of friendships are developed there, and I've developed a lot of resources there as well to kind of go to ask questions. So it kind of happened naturally because I'm naturally inquisitive, I think is the way I describe it. And through the work that I was doing, which required a bit of research, you're always trying to get to the bottom of a story to work out what was correct and what wasn't. So it kind of evolved that way.
That's great. And how about you, Tom? How did you become the Tom Derby of our collecting field?
I mean, I just am passionate about these collectibles, and I've been exposed to more and more throughout the years. I mean, in the 90s, things like double telescoping Ben Kenobi and Darth Vader they were believed to exist. None were known on cards at the time, but even loose examples were just incredibly difficult to come by. There was no Facebook. We weren't as connected with the internet. So, we had the Google Usenet groups and various other ways to get in touch with each other, but there just wasn't any great sharing of information. So it was really just by being immersed in so many finds of things from the mid 90s on that, as I started to see more and more, I gradually started to pick up on a lot of the details and the minutia. And, as the years went by and fakes became more and more rampant, and, more and more money was involved, which brings out more dishonesty. There was just a need in the hobby and a place that I could fill for someone who was both knowledgeable based on experience and honest. And, I just, I started doing it at first just by request, and then it kind of just became a full-time authentication became something that I'm known for now. But I didn't really set out necessarily to do the authentication. It kind of came peripherally by brokering so many items, by finding so many different things, and needing to know what was what and what was authentic. And then I started helping people, and I have tons and tons of friends in this hobby who have tremendous amounts of knowledge. Many have been mentioned: Ron and Chris and Todd and Gus and all these guys. So it was I've always been in a great position to not only have experience to deal with it, but also to be able to reach out to other experts, because I'm close to all of them. If I have a question about bootlegs, I'm going to call Joe Iglesias. I basically know who to call if I don't know the answer, because there's no such thing as the world's biggest expert on everything. There's always somebody who knows more about very specific things than I do. So really, the biggest thing to know for authentication is who to call when you don't know the definitive answer. That's what I would say. I would say I have a tremendous amount of general knowledge, a tremendous amount of knowledge of the era and what things should look like. But for really detailed minutia, if I want to know exactly what blaster the second release of the Luke Jedi came from, I'm going to call Narayan. So.
That's great.
Tom, I'm going to
And
jump in here real quick.
yeah,
Tom, that's an interesting point you bring up. It's almost like our collector club, right? Narayan and I talked about it on a chat earlier today. You're just building a community around yourself of knowledgeable people that are willing to help you out, right? I think that's something that's very important in this hobby and can sometimes get lost in the wheeling, dealing, or no dealing, just buying and selling game. I think that's very interesting you brought that up. And that's something that Narayan and I and Glenn and Shane and Jason, when we started this club, that we set out to do was to build a family, right? And surround ourselves with knowledgeable, trustworthy people, and everyone's willing to help each other out. I just wanted to kind of chime in on that, Tom. That was interesting you brought that up.
And
That's
I
a great
think
point.
one other point is that we're very blessed in the Star Wars community, because as I have become more and more knowledgeable in other areas, comic books and various other types of collectibles, I realize that in most of those other hobbies, uh, you really don't have such great access to such a great circle of honest people. It seems that in a lot of those hobbies, a lot of the biggest collectors are in some ways known for not being honest, or being a little dishonest. So I think we're very blessed because we really do have such a good group of people worldwide um, who do help lead the Star Wars community.
Yeah, it's maybe a little
There's
more
one thing.
diluted in some senses, right? I was just going to say, like, the community has become diluted as it's expanded, and Facebook has kind of evolved, and more people have gotten into the hobby. But that the core culture of Star Wars collecting is pretty honest, and kind of lends itself to honesty more than any other hobby that I've kind of dipped my toes into. So I really want to kind of concur with Tom and Justin on that, the importance of having good people around you at all times. Because without good people, you're not learning anything, and you don't have any sources you can rely on for things.
Absolutely true. Now,
Sorry, man.
Tom, you mentioned earlier, some of the finds and some of the items that you were involved in finding or authenticating over the years. Tell us about a story, a fun story, or a piece that you kind of remember, maybe something that had some significance when you found it.
Well, I do remember one interesting thing was, I remember when uh, Tom Nyheisel and I were going through his basement, and we were going through all of the uh, packaging, we'll call it artwork, but photographs. And we didn't really know the full significance of it. And that it was at that time that, I mean, whether the term has been used before or not, it was at that time that we coined the term photo art. And now that is some of my favorite collectibles are photo art pieces. They're just fantastic. But I remember just being in his basement, and we're pulling them out, because he brought them all home from the morgue, and we're looking at them, and we're realizing that they're more than photographs for the first time. When he just kind of thought he had a bunch of photographs or I think we both thought there was a possibility that these are just photographs in binders, but they were so much more. So that was really exciting to unearth a whole new type of item, so to speak.
Yeah, that's
And
that's
Ben, what about
kind
you?
of uncanny too. Yeah, sorry, I'll just further to what Tom had said. He actually nailed it
Sure.
then, because that's the canon term as well as photo art. So coming up with that term was pretty much bang on. Yeah, I guess for me, like, any time I find something is exciting, whether it's like a loose variation you hadn't seen before, in the early 1990s, or a carded figure. I remember finding the Empire 41 back Leia Bespin and getting really excited, chatting with John Kellman how that had never shown up before, and here I found one in like a random collectible store in Melbourne, Australia. And another thing, the speeder bike prototype that's become known as the Palatoy speeder bike, but actually it had a history in Australia as well as the Toltoy speeder bike. That showed up. A friend of mine emailed me when I was in Thailand again, and said he'd had a weird speeder bike come in with a collection of toys, and sure enough, there's a like Kenner model shop made and milled um, metal speeder bike prototype that was in photography in Europe and Australia, and traced back to the model shop in the US, and was actually in Kenner photography as well, early Kenner photography for the speeder bike. Yeah, but there's a bunch of times. I mean, anytime anyone opens a box and you're seeing something that you haven't seen before, like that feels pretty special. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a
I
And how
really
about
never turned up another 41 back survival kit Leia Bespin since then either.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen that. Sadly, that's the only one that's ever. As a favor to John, I passed it on to him around that time. He needed that for his collection. He had most every variation, or most every variation that wasn't known at the time. But yeah, that was the last one I've seen. And I think what, it's changed hands a couple of times since, and maybe the only one that's ever turned up. Yeah.
Well, thank you both for those stories. I think one of the most amazing things when we visit CIB in town is just seeing, some amazing collectibles that just happen to be there in your office. And I know, Ben, you have a lot of these on display. Is there a favorite item of yours that
Oh man, yeah.
you'd
I
like to
mean,
share?
a lot of that stuff that I own, I pinch myself because I'm often away from there, so I won't see it for a few months at a time. And I come back and look at it, and I'll, when I see something like you know, I mean, the Millennium Falcon wood patterns are probably my favorite. But when I see those things, I'm like, I'm gushing like I'm gushing like I'm a little kid in a toy store again. I really, I can't tell you how strongly I feel about that. But the photo art I own as well, like Tom just mentioned, photo art. I love photo art. So seeing that kind of really, it resonates really deeply with me. I don't know why, but it does. And the hard copies and the wax sculpts and the stuff that's made of sculpts made of acetate. It, I mean, all of it. The really early kind of trial shots, even the Empire Strikes Back first shot / trial shots, whatever you want to call them. I really love the stuff and all of it. Plus, I mean, you never know what you're going to find. Like, I'll come back and Tom will have some, like insane item that's buried beneath a pile of paper somewhere, and you for some reason you'll look and you'll find something like that. It doesn't happen as often as it used to, but it used to be. I mean, it pretty much always has been. Every time I walk into CIB, I'll buy something. It seems like there's always something there that you want for your collection. But yeah, in years gone by, that's always been kind of part of the journey as well, finding stuff that Tom's got hidden away in there.
Yeah, and speaking of photo art, you have quite an impressive run of, I believe, Rebel Commando photo art that's on
Yes,
display
yeah,
there.
yeah,
Tell us about
yeah,
that.
right. Yeah, well, so the first piece of that I got from Tom way back. I want to say 2010 or even maybe 2010 or so, and I just wanted any example of a piece back then, and we actually may have a picture of that if Mark could cue that up for us. Yeah, so here you see like this is a piece of photo art for people that don't know. That's basically the image that's mastered to the front of a blister card, and this is the Rebel Commando photo art with the cover closed on it. If we could go along to the next image of this one, we'll see this is what it looks like. Basically, you're looking at a still photo from the movie that was provided by Lucasfilm to Kenner, and Kenner's packaging vendor would select an image that they thought was appropriate for a blister card. And in this case, they chose the Commando crouching in the Endor bunker. And you can see I guess he's been sprayed a pretty decently candy green there. And it's a little tough to see, but you've got I may actually have to take my glasses here to have a look, but you've got a percentage of the image size, of the final image size of this photograph that it will be reduced to appear on the blister card. And, as well as other details, the name of the figure and that kind of thing, along with the crop marks. If we go to the next picture, we'll see that image is now, as you see on that blister card. Now that blister card's fairly unique because it's not just a regular carded figure. Obviously, it's a proof card. It has squared off bottom corners. The figure there in the blister is a proto mold or an injection molded. I guess it's almost like a facsimile of a hard copy, but it's an injection molded version, which was easy to make than a hard copy. They could rapidly kind of churn these out inside Kenner's model shop, but it's hand painted and mounted there with a hand glued bubble. And a lot of people see this particular image and they'll look at it and go, wow, that's really cool. And that's kind of all that they'll say about it. But if we could cue up the next image, what you'll notice, okay, that's an image of it with the photo art next to it. So yeah, you can pretty clearly see the way it translates across to the blister card with those kind of template type images with the logo and the nameplate and the figure there in the card. But if we go to the next photo, we'll see that they actually had another go. Well, actually, here we have. So here we have that image on the Tri-Logo card. That image, obviously translates more to the Tri-Logo card because you've got not as quite as severe a crop, but it looks no less spectacular there. But if you go to the next image, we'll quickly realize that there's another a piece of Rebel Commando photo art. This one just says Commando. They've kind of given up on writing Rebel Commando, just referring to it as Commando now. But I guess it was their second run at it. So if we go to the next image, we see that this is kind of a more drab brown version of it, and the Rebel soldier behind the crouching one has been airbrushed out of the picture completely, and they've just kind of completed the bunker there. And the reason this looks different to the previous image is because Kenner actually didn't like that first image. They went with another one. Most people have not even noticed that when I've showed them that first piece of photo art and the carded figure. But if we go now to the next image, we'll see that this is what the final product looked like. So it was that second piece of photo it was based on. And a lot of people, as I said, Rebel Commando maybe being unexciting or a little uninspiring, they won't notice that necessarily. But I think the next image may show them side by side to see how different it was. And actually it shows it with a photo art. But yeah, I mean, you can see pretty clearly again how it translates across. And you've really got a very different looking package versus the one that's green, which I think is in the next image, if Mark could cue that up. yeah, we see the comparison. It's actually really different, that first attempt at the rejected photo art for this character, and I believe it was rejected because the figure was green. It was possibly, and this is just a theory, that was kind of supported a bit by the guys at the packaging vendor, who said that the figure clashed a little bit too much with the green commando in the picture, so they went for this more austere brown on the left, which made the figure stand out a bit. But that's kind of always fascinated me, that you could have something like that. This is the weird thing about the hobby. You have something like this that's such a almost an unnoticeable thing to most collectors. I'll look at it and just not even notice that that's a green commando on the front of that blister card. But you can kind of mine these little bits of minutia, and that kind of lends itself to, I guess, to my inquisitive mind, and appeals to my love of photo art as well.
Ben, that's just
Yeah,
absolutely amazing sharing that. I mean, just yeah, again, the attention to detail, right? And I mean, I think, with years
yeah.
of doing this, you said what, 28, 27, couldn't figure out the math there,
Well,
but
yeah,
somewhere around.
yeah. That's actually 28, right? I just keep forgetting how old I am. It didn't sound right to say I was that old, but I guess I am.
But
Yeah,
I mean, just the so many years of doing this, right? Those are the kinds of things you start to
yeah,
look for. And I mean, obviously, that's not a run you put together in the last 5 years or something. I'm sure that's a lot
yeah,
of time
yeah,
and efforts put into that, and I'm
yeah.
sure
Absolutely, and
just
help from Tom and
tracking that
others
stuff
too.
down.
Yeah,
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 that's
yeah.
right.
Really,
Back to the
really tough.
community aspects.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So
Without them, I wouldn't have it. I mean, yeah,
so we got both of you guys here, and with the state of what's going on in the world right now, a lot of people were kind of scared when all this has happened. I mean, for just reasons, right? Job security, things of that nature. But I think we've really seen what I assumed would be kind of a downturn in the hobby. It hasn't really gone that way. And obviously, we're not asking for all your tips and tricks here, but let's talk a little bit about the state of the high end and prototype market. And if you have a specific aspect you want to go into, 2D, 3D stuff, first shots, higher end, or maybe even just like the high end foreign market. Tom, do you have anything maybe you wanted to talk about? Maybe some trends you've been seeing currently in within this year in the hobby?
Sure. I mean, I can talk about trends that we've seen this year, but I can also discuss more long-term trends. I mean, first of all, getting to your comment about the hobby, I think all of us were scared of how any business was going to go in March, but it was fascinating that by the end of April, it never really slowed down, and by the end of April, it was almost as if it was unaffected, the hobby, and then soon after it picked up, and I would share that we are about at the end of August, and I've done more business this year than last year already. So there's certainly the hobby is very strong in terms of high end. As far as trends in the hobby go, I would say that some of the things I've been noticing in the last few years are very long-term trends. Or if we look back 20 years at something like the droids and Ewoks, I think that's a good one to look at, because I think those aren't connected with the trilogy. I think that they've had a little drop off over that period of time, because if you look back 20 years, they were selling for $5,000 for certain hard copies that might be 10 or 15 now. I mean, some are maybe more, but going up by a factor of 2 or 3 is much, much less than most items. Most items have gone up by factors of 20 or factors of 50 in some cases. So I think Droids and Ewoks has been something that has trended somewhat downward, and I think that's just because of its lack of connection to the current trilogy, the Disney parks, the core Star Wars lore. Other items have just been very strong. I mean, you can look at certain items like diecast and micro that have gone through downturns, but now they have their own little niche groups collecting, or I shouldn't say little, but they have significant niche groups collecting now, and focused collectors going after specific characters. So, I mean, I really think that uh, because there is such a lack of supply for many types of pre-production items, in general, we've continued to see prices climb. I mean, how high can they climb? I can't predict it. I could have never predicted we would be where we are now. But there's certainly no signs in the hobby that are pointing towards. I mean, there have been some things that have trended down, but it's usually a supply and demand issue. First shots is a good example. a lot of people let go of a lot of first shots over the last year or two, and a few big collectors stepped out. But now that most of those first shots have been pulled back into the market and split up into smaller collections, it does seem like even that market is recovering once again and stabilizing, and will probably continue to go up. Most things have stayed stable or increased. That's the general state of the hobby. I'd be happy to answer anything more specific.
No, I mean, I think that's great. Diving into the Droids and Ewok stuff, good knowledge there. I mean, micro collection, again, some really good stuff. Ben, you have anything you either want to add to what Tom said, or anything maybe you've noticed differently?
Yeah, for sure. The one thing I've noticed is there seems to be more of a churn of items in the kind of higher end level of the hobby. Stuff that would never have been available for sale is kind of changing hands. And I was concerned, as I was spending a lot of money during this pandemic, during lockdown, as it seems like most people, I just spent a lot more time looking online at things that I wanted to buy, and hitting up people that had pieces that I'd asked about over the years. And I was worried, as I was buying these more expensive items, if I could sell the items I wanted to finance that bigger purchase in a few cases. And yeah, I was kind of surprised to see it wasn't just me that was doing that; it was others as well. But I'm more like surprised. Something that came to mind when Tom was talking just now was the theme for the hobby for me since I got into it was, kind of at the beginning for me, you had more carded figures in Australia than you can imagine. It was the Hong Kong warehouse was dumped there, and I thought we're never going to see the end of this. This stuff's going to be available forever. In the early 2000s, you could still go open unopened cases and buy as many carded figures from some headers as you wanted. And then all of a sudden it was gone, and I was kind of gobsmacked. Suddenly all this product has dried up, and I kind of feel like I'm seeing the beginnings of that potentially in prototypes. I'm not saying that prices won't go up and down, but I generally feel like we've kind of seen easily the bulk of what's going to kind of appear in the collector realm in the prototype, the kind of prototype space. It's already out there with collectors. By far and away, the bulk of it is with collectors now. So it's kind of just churning around, and you're not seeing stuff for sale like you would going back 10 years ago. Prices started to take off, sure, about 2014, 2015, I think, but there was always stuff around, it seemed. But now it doesn't seem like you're seeing stuff for sale as often. I mean, you do see some pieces that more, kind of esoteric type prototype stuff for sale, but it seems like the harder to find pieces are really kind of getting nice and buried, so to speak.
I'm sure we're all aware of the group Deal or No Deal, right, gentlemen? That's kind of taking the hobby by storm lately.
Yeah, it kept us all
Something that's obvious. That's obvious in that group, right? Is the modern stuff is really gone high, but I think that's pretty easy to determine, possibly at least. It's a little more approachable to get into those items per piece. But I know you guys aren't. You guys focus more on the vintage stuff. I know, Ben, you have quite a nice modern collection as well.
Yeah,
Tom, and I know you deal in it a bit too. But one thing we did see in Deal or No Deal I thought was quite unique was the Power of the Force 2 Greedo Chromalin. Do you guys remember seeing that piece on Deal or No Deal?
Yeah.
It ended up going for about $3,000, I think was the sale price. What do you guys, or what kind of forecast do you see of that higher, rare, early Power of the Force 2 modern stuff? I mean, $3,000 for a Chromalin, that's pretty up there for a modern piece. What kind of trend do you guys see there? Any kind of speculation you've got? Ben, looks like you got something ready. What do you think on that?
Oh no, I'm just like, when I saw that price and what that ended at, I was thinking about what the Chromalins were for sale from Tom Nyhazel and the list of what Tom broke it in 2000, and $3,000 would have bought you, a Star Wars Chromalin, like a 12-back character on a Star Wars Chromalin. But
the Chewbacca photo.
Yeah, you could have bought the Chewbacca photo up for that amount of money. It's tough for me because I've seen that. I think it's way tougher for me to accept that when I look back at that. But then when I think about it, if you're a Greedo focus collector and you can't add your vintage collection, it's going to cost you tens of thousands of dollars to add a Star Wars Greedo Chromalin. So when you see that for $3,000, and maybe that seems like a good deal, I think that's driven it. I mean, yeah, that's kind of the way that I've looked at it. But it's harder for me, I think, having seen Tom Nyhazel's list that was broken through time sit around for so long with prices that were lower. Going back 20 years, I should say.
That's right. Tom, have you put much time into looking into some of the modern stuff recently? The past 4 or 5 months.
I was surprised by the Greedo example, and but not terribly surprised because, as the Star Wars hobby expands, the biggest change probably coming with Disney purchasing Lucasfilm in 2013, Facebook coming around, just really greatly growing the hobby. I've noticed that there's plenty of people in their 20s and early 30s who are collecting now. Now, to them, a 1995 or 96 card is vintage. Well, it's their childhood. So it doesn't really surprise me at all. It doesn't have, none of the newer items have the same emotional connection for me, but I absolutely can understand how they would have the same emotional connection to the younger generation who bought them and played with them in the stores. So I'm not terribly surprised because there just aren't that many chromolins around. In fact, I'm not even certain that they would. I doubt they would have used chromalin technology very far past that point. That's got to be one of the latest uses of that technology. So I would think that that's actually a rarity in and of itself.
You just kind of segued into my next question, was how things are changing in the process, right? With 3D printing and
Sure.
digital artwork, a lot of this stuff is going away. And I think it has been for a while. Ben, you got anything? I mean, I've been fortunate enough to pick up a couple modern pieces off of you. I know you're still connected to some of those guys. What have you seen as far as
Well,
older ways, older processes kind of going by the wayside?
yeah, like the thing that really kind of blew my mind and made me realize how different things are now was that, you used to have the model shop was one department within Kenner, packaging was another department within Kenner. These are huge, huge departments. I'm trying to think what the third one is, but basically, I know a gentleman, really, really top guy. He was in charge of these three massive departments, formerly massive departments at Hasbro, but it was just a much, much smaller team to handle all three. Whereas at Canada, that would have been, outside packaging vendors, color separators, printers, internal staff, packaging director, art director, graphic designers, model shop, model makers, injection molders. Like it would have been hundreds of people, but yet you had this really tiny staff now that can handle, when I say tiny, relatively tiny staff now that could handle all kind of three of those realms. And that blew my mind, just realizing how many jobs have disappeared in the process. So yeah, I mean, you obviously don't. They're not using chromolins anymore and haven't for some time. I'm guessing, like Tom said, it was about the time that Greedo was made.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a shame that a lot of that stuff's going away. I mean, 3D printing technology is getting better. It's getting cheaper, right? It's a lot easier to prove some of that
Yeah,
stuff, and it's less processes, less money, better bottom line, right? That's what it's all about for
yeah.
them.
No,
Um,
sorry. The other department was sculpting, and the reason why it had shrunk dramatically was because of 3D printing. Yeah, sculpting. They I think ceased to to kind of hire freelance sculptors returning product in wax like I want to say 10 years or so ago, even earlier than that. I think it was. I can't remember the exact date I was told, but yeah.
well, guys, I kind of had a question for both of you, and this was more just a generalization. Kind of if you got something to say to the hobby, like if you had advice for somebody that wanted to get into pre-production, whether it's vintage, whether it's modern, or some of these really rare high-end, Harbert runs and things of that nature. What would you tell a new collector, or maybe a seasoned collector that's about to take that next step in their collection? Tom, what would you say to that kind of person? What kind of advice would you have?
Oh yeah, that's it's pretty universal across almost every collectible hobby, which is that buy the highest condition or the highest. I mean, there are limitations here, but basically, buying high-end items, whether it be pre-production items or carded items, um, those are always going to get the best return on investment. I mean, you can certainly the entry level item might be one third the price, but it will usually appreciate a lot slower than the top 10% condition wise of items, or historically a hard copy has appreciated more than a first shot. For example, if we go like a first shot was $250 and a hard copy was $1,000 in 2004 roughly. And so since that point, you could take that same first shot that was $250 and it's probably $3,000. The hard copy that was $1,000 is $40,000. So certainly the the items for pre-production, the items that there are a very limited quantity of, and everybody wants, would be the items to invest in. So anything that you can buy the minute you decide you want to buy it probably doesn't have the same investment potential as something you have to wait, look out for, plan ahead, and be patient and eventually come across it. So that's in a nutshell. That's a quick lesson.
Yeah, I'm sure we could spend hours and hours, right, picking your brain or picking everyone's brain here and trying to figure out, the best way to go about it. But thank you for that, Ben. You got anything to add or agreements,
I'm
things of that nature?
probably coming at it from a different angle. So like everything Tom said, I think if you're looking at things from a financial point of view, I think that's right. I've tended always to follow my heart, and sometimes just as Tom mentioned in the comment, like if you can find something for sale when the minute you decide you want to buy it, it's probably not the item to buy. That's actually, I think that's true 99% of the time. I've certainly a couple of times come to that decision on pieces and have had that item and it didn't follow that rule, and it was absolutely like something I should have bought and maybe did or didn't. But as a collector, I kind of would suggest you follow your heart, because I mean,
Oh yeah.
yeah, obviously you want to be responsible with your money, but I tend to buy stuff that I like, because it seems like if I liked it, other people in my age group would like it anyway, I guess. But worst comes to worst, I've got this item that I really like, and it's obviously not maybe a great investment strategy, but it's kind of like I tend to go more with nostalgia in my heart, or perhaps equally with my head. I mean, maybe I've got smarter as I've got older and haven't made big purchases where I lost a bunch of money, which I definitely have over the years. When you buy a bunch of proof cards and suddenly they're getting blown out for $40 each at a celebration, and if you try to sell the ones you got to buy others, you're not going to be able to get too much money. But by and large, I've always kind of followed my heart, and it's fortunately, touch wood, steered me right.
No, I couldn't agree with you more on that. I mean, I think that a lot of hobbies they try to prop up just as a collectible. That's kind of how we approached Power of the Force 2 collectibles when they came out. Everybody bought six of them, one for yourself, five for investment. Clearly, that didn't end up being a good investment. I think that people have to have an emotional attachment to it, like you mentioned. There has to be that strong connection. And of course, you have that significant advantage of uh, doing this for long enough to let that emotional connection cultivate. I think when brand new collectors come in, it may take a little longer for them to kind of get their footing and understand what's what and what they would want more. But yeah, I couldn't agree more with what you said. That there has to be emotion, there has to be love. You should only. In fact, I own the domain name, which I've never used, investinwhatyoulove.com. So certainly that's some of the best advice there is, I would say.
Great, fantastic advice, guys. I kind of agree with both of you. Tom, to your point, my mother always said, if you want something that's, you know, instead of buying something twice, right? Instead of buying the cheap version, because you can then, even though you still want the nicer one, just save up a little more and get the nicer one. But of course, Ben, as a collector, you got to go with your heart, right? You got to love the items. You got to love to display them. If you just buying up a bunch of stuff and throwing it in a tub in a closet, maybe it's still bringing you joy, but maybe that's not quite my philosophy. Guys, we got just a few more minutes here, and some great discussion on prototype stuff. But let's talk about how are you guys doing? What's life like now? What's life going to be like going forward? Anything changing, Ben, as far as collections? Tom, with the business, what's going on with CIB right now?
Well, as you guys know from getting very brief responses from me over the last month, I've been moving both my home for the first time in 16 years, and gradually CIB will be changing locations through the end of the year. So it's a tremendous amount of work. 6 moving trucks so far, probably 3 or 4 more to go. We're buried in stuff, but it's fun. We've got some. We just got in some fantastic. We have 9 glass cases that weigh 500 pounds each, and it was an absolute nightmare to get those cases that are all glass, nothing else, with LED lighting down around my backyard and into our new showroom. So anyway, it's been a challenge, but it's fun. It's a big change. I can't wait to have you guys out to the new CIB, where we'll have a lot more showcases, a lot more. It won't be quite as fun in the sense that it won't be like walking through a flea market that hasn't changed in 20 years and still has just piles of crazy valuable stuff around. It'll be a little bit better organized and displayed, so it'll be a different vibe. But we can't wait to have you come out and see it.
Ben, if you can get the name of that trucking company, I might slip the guy 100. He can come by my house real quick, drop a few things off. No, just kidding. Ben, what's going on with you? I know you travel quite a bit, right? You're always kind of on the move, it seems like. How are you doing right now?
Yeah,
What,
that
what
kind
you
of.
got coming up the rest?
Well, mate, that stopped in a real hurry come around about March. I remember an Uber driver giving me, actually, maybe it was even early February, an Uber driver in France gave me a mask as I was getting to the airport to head into a flight back to the US and then onto Australia. And I'm like, damn, this seems to be getting serious, this virus out there. But yeah, once I'd kind of traversed Europe and the world, and by the time I'd landed in Australia, it was even more serious. So I guess I was stuck there for lockdown, and that kind of put the brakes on me in a lot of ways. And not to mention separated me from my girlfriend for a while. She'd come out with me, but just managed to get back to America before the door was kind of closed there. And yeah, so it's been a different mode of living. I've had to sit and spend a lot more time, thinking about myself in life than I otherwise would have. But it's kind of translates into a lot more collecting as well, which is kind of crazy. I noticed Narayan there in the background. I can see some Darth Vader cases that I see you rack up pretty regularly. So I'm pretty sure it's been similar for you too, mate. There's some nice ones there in the background.
Yeah, I thought I'd be spending less, but it seems like my bank account's suffering every day.
Yeah, well, like all of us, I believe all of us are like that. I know certainly I am. But no, more recently, I guess I'm back now, living with my girlfriend in the States, and we just got engaged. Obviously, that's taken up a bit of my time, but also I'm diving right into some projects with a few Kenner people, and of course, always researching and always kind of looking to understand processes a little better. So I'm between that and a few other things that I do in life that kind of keeping pretty busy with hobby related stuff, which is great because it means I can forget about reality whenever I want to. I can dive into that, and I've always find that. Well, I found the hobby. The hobby can be it can be stressful, but can be a great escape as well. When you're looking for something you really want, and you're finding it, or you're finding a bit of information you really feel good about learning, and that's kind of, I think, the important thing that the hobby's done for me throughout all of this.
Congratulations on the engagement.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks. No, I'm pretty happy. I'm
Congratulations.
really, really stoked. Yeah, thanks, Narayan.
Yeah,
Appreciate it, mate.
it's fantastic news. Well, guys, I guess on behalf of the Georgia Alliance, I mean, you guys have been Tom. You showed up at my home, kind of almost unannounced, back. Gosh, was that almost 3 years ago now? 2017
We
December. Is that when that was?
$3. I wasn't
Holiday
just gonna
party.
let it slide.
No, I still owe you $3. Yeah, sorry, sorry. Uh, but
Oh,
Tom, we kind of reached out, and Ryan knew you a bit better than I did in the very beginning. We reached out, and you have been extremely supportive, and you introduced us to Ben. And Ben, when you're at least in the States, the last 3 years,
yeah.
you've always been right there to help out. And on behalf of the whole club, we extremely appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for everything, and thank you for taking time. I know,
Yeah.
Tom, you sound extremely busy. Ben, just the same. And thanks for taking the time
Hey,
out of your weekend.
thank you guys for everything you do. I
Yeah,
mean,
thanks to you as well. Yeah.
Collectors Club before, and now we finally have a place there. We don't have to go to New York or Pennsylvania or all those other fantastic clubs. Georgia has its own fantastic club, and that's thanks to you guys and everyone else in the Georgia Club. And we really appreciate everything you do.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
for
just
Ryan, you
me,
want
got
to
any last
echo.
parting words?
Yeah. Yeah, I want to thank you both again for sharing your wisdom with us. But there's one. Before we end this chat, I really want to acknowledge Tom. Something, being a medical professional, I didn't want to leave this chat without at least acknowledging the amazing work you've done over the last few months in helping with the pandemic, and you have basically converted the acrylic factories to be making protective intubation shields for healthcare professionals. And that's an amazing thing that goes way beyond just Star Wars collecting. And just I had to mention that. So
Well, I
thank you
mean,
for that.
it's been me to have some sense of purpose during this challenging time. I mean, it's not I don't need thanks for it. It's been wonderful. So, but thank you for your kind words. I'm more than happy to help.
Well, gentlemen, I appreciate you taking all the time with us tonight. It was an amazing chat. Hopefully, we'll get through this thing and we'll get to all hang out together soon. On behalf of the club, it's bye from the Collectible Investment Chat. We got room sales coming up tonight. Maybe Tom Derby's going to be there selling some stuff. Ben will be selling some stuff. You never know.
You never know.
Maybe buying some
All
stuff.
right.
Yeah. All right. Well, cheers, guys.
Thank you,
Thanks
guys.
again for tuning in.
Cheers.
Thanks, Yo. Thanks for having us. Thanks to both of you. Cheers, mate.